begins like a small cut, sharp, unexpected, and strangely familiar. You remember the moment. Maybe it was a conversation that ended too quickly. Maybe it was a look, an absence, a silence that rang louder than any goodbye. Rejection doesn't always come with a clear verdict. Sometimes it arrives wrapped in politeness. Sometimes it's just vanishing, fading, being forgotten. And you, standing there, are left with one unspoken question echoing inside, why not me? In that moment, something collapses. You feel like you're on the outside of life, peering in through the glass. There's a heaviness in your chest, not just from this single moment, but from all the others. It dredges up each past rejection, stitched together like a shadow cloak you didn't know you were still wearing. It weighs more than you realized, and you carry it into every new encounter without knowing it. But what if that first sting isn't punishment? What if it's a spark? Because deep beneath the hurt is something alive, something real. Rejection reveals your longing. It brings your desires to the surface, raw and undeniable. And that's the first truth you care. You care deeply. And to care is not weakness. It's the beginning of transformation. You've spent so much time trying not to care, trying to be above it, numb to it, stronger than it. But numbness isn't strength, it's absence. And rejection, though it cuts, also calls something into presence. It makes you feel. It reminds you that you exist, that you desire connection, purpose, belonging. And it whispers, however cruelly, that some part of you still believes you are not enough as you are. Here is where Jung's shadow steps in. The part of you that fears rejection most, the one that flinches, hides, shrinks, that is the self you've exiled to the unconscious. And yet, that part holds your most precious truths. The child who wanted to be chosen, the lover who wanted to be seen, the artist who wanted to be heard. None of them disappeared. They just learned to stay silent to keep you safe. But rejection stirs them awake. It is not the rejection itself that causes suffering. It's what you make it mean. You internalize it as proof that you are unwanted, unworthy, unlovable. But what if it is not about you at all? What if rejection is merely redirection? What if it's life, reshuffling you gently, showing you where you don't belong so you can find where you truly do? This is not spiritual bypassing. This is soul work, because in that first sting lies the invitation. Will you define yourself by how others treat you, or will you use this moment to go inward and find your own definition? You may still feel like something is broken, but brokenness can be sacred, too. Think of the Japanese art of kintsugi, where shattered pottery is mended with gold, not hidden, not discarded, but honored. The cracks become part of the story, and in doing so, make it more beautiful. So it is with your heart, with. And maybe this is the question you need to ask yourself now. What if rejection is the exact medicine your soul prescribed for your growth? You're not here to be chosen by everyone. You're here to remember you were never meant to beg for a place at the table you could build yourself. Even as the pain pulses through you, you begin to see the edges of something else, possibility. Rejection burns away the surface illusion that your worth is dependent on someone else's approval. That illusion had to die, and in its place, a space opens. It's uncomfortable, it's unfamiliar, but it's yours. Breathe. Let yourself feel the weight of the silence they left behind. Then listen closely beneath it. There is a new sound rising, your voice, fragile, but true. This is the first moment of reclamation, not dramatic, not loud, just you, choosing to stay with yourself when someone else didn't. That is a quiet revolution. And from here, everything begins to shift. You think it's about them, the one who left, the one who never answered, the one who forgot your name the moment you gave them your heart. But what if they were just a mirror? What if rejection is not something that happens to you, but something that reveals you to yourself? You begin to see it now. Every pang of rejection reflects something deeper, your own fear of not being enough, your hidden belief that you must earn love, your silent dread that one day everyone will see through the mask you've been wearing. This isn't just about who didn't want you, it's about who you believe you have to be in order to be wanted. In the mirror of rejection, the image is never clean. It's distorted by the fog of your childhood wounds, the echoes of people who couldn't love you properly, and the voice you inherited that says you're too much, or not enough, or somehow both. And yet, you keep stepping up to this mirror again and again, asking it the same question, am I worthy now? Jung knew that projection is a sneaky thing. You project your worth into someone else's hands, hoping they'll give it back to you wrapped in validation. But when they don't, the mirror cracks, and what's left staring back at you? Your shadow, the version of you you've tried so hard not to be. Too emotional, too needy, too intense, too soft, too complicated, too real. You've spent years polishing a version of yourself you thought would be easier to love. But the mirror doesn't lie. When rejection hits, it shows you where you've abandoned yourself to be acceptable to others. And that's the real grief, not that they left, but that you did. So ask yourself gently now, what have I rejected in me, just to be accepted by them? Rejection doesn't just remove someone from your life. It removes the illusion that you needed them to complete you. It shows you what you've placed outside yourself, your power, your voice, your value. And now that it's been denied by another, you have a chance to take it back. You remember a moment from childhood. Maybe it was being picked last, being laughed at, being left out. The feelings then were the same: shame, confusion, hurt. You didn't have the tools then. You made meaning out of their absence. You thought, there must be something wrong with me. And so you started building your mask. But today is different. Today you are not powerless. Today you are the observer, the healer, the one who turns inward. And when you look into that mirror now, you don't flinch, you stay. You see the cracked pieces, you see the eyes behind the pain, and you whisper, I see you, I'm not leaving. This is how healing begins, not by pretending rejection doesn't hurt, but by letting it teach you, letting it show you all the ways you've longed for someone else to fill the places you've been afraid to touch, letting it uncover the part of you that's been waiting for your own love all along. Rejection peels back the surface. You may have thought you were being confident, grounded, strong, but rejection will always find the place inside that still wants to be chosen. And in that exposure, in that rawness, lies a sacred gift. You are no longer pretending. You are here honest, tender, cracked open. And maybe now, as you look into the mirror, you can ask a better question. Not, why didn't they want me? But what part of myself am I ready to reclaim now that they're gone? That is how you use rejection. Not as a wound to dwell in, but as a portal into yourself. Every time someone closes a door, another opens one that leads inward, and you, courageous soul, are just now beginning to walk through. Take a breath. Let the mirror soften. Let your reflection blur, not into someone else's version of you, but into something real, something sacred, something that doesn't need to be fixed, only seen. There's a moment when the pain of rejection isn't just sadness, it turns sharp, almost accusing. It asks, what did I do wrong? And in that moment, you start searching for answers outside of yourself. You turn the pain into a story. They misunderstood me. They weren't ready. They couldn't see the real me. And sometimes, that's true, but deeper still, there's another truth waiting, buried in silence. What part of me was I hoping they would carry? This is the secret terrain Carl Jung walked with precision, the land of projection. You don't just fall in love with people. You fall in love with the aspects of yourself you've disowned, projected onto someone else like a dream screen. Their confidence reflects the confidence you suppress. Their rejection reflects your inner doubt, and their disappearance echoes all the ways you've ghosted yourself. Rejection feels so personal because it brushes up against the rawest edge of the psyche, your shadow. Not the dark, evil part of you, but the unacknowledged, the hidden, the disallowed. Every quality you've been told not to be too emotional, too ambitious, too vulnerable, too loud, too different gets exiled to the shadow. But these parts don't die. They wait, and rejection is often what awakens them. You begin to feel the strange mix of emotions, grief, rage, longing, shame. That mix is your signal. Something deeper is surfacing. A part of you wants to be known. A part you've kept in hiding has just been accidentally revealed. And now, You face a choice, suppress it again, or sit beside it and listen. The shadow doesn't show itself clearly. It comes disguised. Maybe you obsess over the one who left. Maybe you can't stop analyzing their words. Maybe you try to become what you think they would have loved. But all of that is misdirection. The real work is behind the scenes, where the shadow whispers, what if this is not about them at all? What if the one you loved only played the role of mirror, catalyst, or teacher? What if they were never supposed to stay, but only to show you what still lives inside you? You begin to trace the pattern. You remember others who rejected you before. You see the echoes, the repetition, the same ache repeating through different names and faces. And now, maybe for the first time, you stop blaming them. Not because they were right, but because this is no longer about them. It's about how you've been using them to avoid meeting yourself. You sit in stillness. You feel the burn behind your ribs, the tears you didn't let fall, the ache of not being chosen. But this time, instead of running from the pain, you lean into it, you let it wash over you, and in doing so, you make space for something new, clarity. Rejection, when faced with openness, turns into revelation. You see the projections, now the ways you've handed others your worth, the way you've expected someone else to name you lovable, valuable, whole. You've asked others to reflect what you were unwilling to affirm for yourself, but that's not their job. It's yours. And here comes the hardest truth. You can't be loved fully until you retrieve those pieces of yourself you've buried. You may feel naked in this moment, unmasked, exposed, but this is not weakness. This is the power of knowing who you really are beneath the armor. So you begin to call them back, those disowned parts. The tender child who just wanted to belong, the wild dreamer who wanted to be big, the sensual being who longed to be touched, the fierce voice that was told to quiet down. All of them, all of you. And as they return, so does your energy, so does your voice, so does your sense of self, no longer fractured, no longer dependent. You are not waiting for them to choose you anymore. You are choosing you in all your complexity, your rawness, your beauty. Now, you ask a deeper question. What shadow part of me is ready to come home through this pain? Let this be your invitation. Rejection doesn't mean you're unworthy. It means the universe is pointing you inward, asking you to reclaim your wholeness, one fragment at a time, one truth at a time, one deep, compassionate breath at a time. You remember what it felt like when they looked past you, as though your heart was invisible. You remember the tightness in your chest, the way your voice caught in your throat when you tried to stay composed. And maybe the hardest part was not that they rejected you, but that they rejected the most honest version of you you'd ever dared to show. You had been brave. You had been vulnerable. You let yourself be seen, not the polished mask, but the trembling, real self underneath. And they still walked away. Or worse, they stayed but looked through you. That's the wound that lingers. But there is something sacred here. Buried beneath the hurt, you had something real to offer. What they denied wasn't weakness. It was your power, your truth, your light. And now, your task is not to dim it, it is to reclaim it. You begin to see what you gave away, not out of desperation, but hope. You hoped your softness would be met with care. You hoped your openness would be cherished. You hoped your dreams would be heard. And when they weren't, you didn't just grieve the loss of the other person. You grieved the loss of who you got to be in their presence. But here's what no one told you. You do not need their permission to keep being that version of you. The world tried to teach you that if someone doesn't accept a part of you, that part must be wrong, unlovable, too much. But that's a lie. What they couldn't receive was a reflection of their own limitations, not your worth. Jung reminds us that we often meet others as symbols, archetypes of the inner work we have yet to complete. They were not just a person, they were a test, a turning point, a mirror. And now, the invitation is clear. What part of you are you ready to reclaim, even if no one else ever validates it? Maybe you've silenced your creativity because someone once said your art wasn't good enough. Maybe you hide your sensitivity because it was once called weakness. Maybe you hold back your voice because someone mocked your truth. But now, in the silence they left behind, something inside you begins to stir again. the urge to return to yourself. You begin small. You write that one sentence you were afraid to write. You speak the truth you swallowed. You wear the color you love. You move your body in the way that feels like freedom. And as you do, something in your soul exhales. Rejection is not proof that you must become less. It is the call to become more of who you really are, not to spite them, not to prove them wrong, but to return to yourself with reverence. You stop chasing the versions of you they wanted. You start becoming the version you were always meant to be. You begin to notice how much of your life was shaped by avoidance, avoiding being too much, avoiding disapproval, avoiding the echo of being dismissed. But that avoidance built a cage, and rejection, paradoxically, has cracked the door open. The part of you they couldn't handle, that is your gold. The very trait you were told to hide your intensity, your passion, your hunger for connection, that is the exact energy your healing requires. And now, you are being asked to carry it yourself, not in shame, but in celebration. So ask the question, what sacred part of me did they reject that I now choose to reclaim? This is not a self-help slogan. This is soul retrieval. This is remembering the fragments that were scattered when you believed someone else had the right to decide who you were allowed to be. And maybe the next time you feel the sting of being unseen, you'll pause, not to shrink, not to harden, but to rise, to gather, to return to the altar of your own becoming and place your rejected parts there, not as sacrifices, but as offerings. You are not for everyone, but you are for you, and that, finally, is enough. There's a silence that follows rejection, and at first, it feels unbearable. The conversations stop, the text thread dies, the attention fades, and suddenly, you are alone with yourself in a way you hadn't anticipated. The silence is thick, almost loud. Every corner of your mind echoes with the absence of the one who used to fill your world. It feels like loss. It is loss. But it is also something else, something quietly powerful space. You begin to sit in that space, not by choice at first, but because there's nowhere else to go. The distractions don't work the way they used to. The noise of the world doesn't fill the hollow anymore. And so, reluctantly, you turn inward. You listen. And in the stillness, something sacred begins to unfold. You start to notice things, the rhythm of your own breathing, the soft ache of your unmet needs, the weight you've carried, not just from this latest rejection, but from a lifetime of seeking validation through connection, and now, stripped of all external approval. You are left with the most important question of all. Can you sit with yourself and love what you find? Loneliness used to feel like failure, like proof that something was wrong with you. But now, in the quiet, you begin to see it differently. This loneliness is not a punishment, it is a crucible, a space of deep alchemy where old stories fall apart and the truth begins to rise. Carl Jung spoke of individuation, the journey of becoming whole, by integrating all the lost and hidden aspects of the self. And there is no faster doorway into that process than solitude. Not the kind forced by circumstance, but the kind accepted willingly, tenderly, the kind you walk into with reverence instead of resistance. This is the moment when you stop running, you stop performing, you stop trying to win back what has already walked away. You let it go, not because it doesn't matter, but because you matter more, and in that letting go, a clearing opens within you. You begin to see how much energy you spent trying to be chosen, how many versions of yourself you tailored to fit what you thought others wanted, how often you bent your truth to avoid being left behind. But here you are left, and still alive, still breathing, still whole. In loneliness, you meet the parts of yourself that only reveal themselves in the dark. The inner child, long ignored, the artist, long silenced, the dreamer, long dismissed. They sit with you now, not demanding anything, just wanting to be noticed. And maybe for the first time, you don't turn away. You learn to pour your own tea. You learn to take your own hand. You learn to listen to the voice that's been whispering under the noise all along. And that voice says, you are not unworthy. You are just unaccompanied. There's a difference. Loneliness becomes less of a hole and more of a mirror. You begin to see yourself without distortion, without the masks of trying, without the performance of perfection. Just you tired, honest, tender, still becoming. You ask, who am I when no one is watching? And in that question, you uncover treasure. You find preferences that aren't shaped by someone else's expectations. You remember the music you loved before you shared a playlist. You wear clothes that feel like home instead of a costume. You laugh at something alone and realize the joy is real, even unshared. This is not isolation. This is sanctuary. Yes, it still hurts sometimes. The silence is not always gentle. There are nights when the bed feels too big and mornings that arrive too slowly. But even then, you no longer rush to fill the space. You let it be. You let you be. And slowly, that becomes enough. One day, without realizing it, you feel grateful. Grateful for the rejection that forced this stillness. Grateful for the absence that revealed your own presence. Grateful for the room you now have to breathe without shrinking to fit. You were never meant to live your life waiting for someone to choose you. You were meant to choose yourself, over and over, especially when no one else does. So here's the question to carry forward. What part of me only emerges when I am truly alone, and what would happen if I let that part lead? The loneliness is no longer a wound. It is a womb, a space where something new is growing, something true, something holy. Let it rise. You thought it was just pain, just bad luck, just another closed door. But somewhere, in the middle of your grieving, something unexpected begins to happen. You start to notice patterns. A sentence in a book echoes the very thought you couldn't say out loud. A stranger says the exact thing you needed to hear. A song plays, and it feels like a conversation with the divine. You stop scrolling and stare, because the message staring back at you feels eerily precise, almost meant for you. This is not coincidence. This is synchronicity. Carl Jung knew that the psyche and the outer world are not separate realms. He saw that meaningful coincidences, those uncanny, perfectly timed events are not random, but glimpses into the architecture of your deeper becoming. And now, as you sit in the wake of rejection, the universe begins to speak again, not with logic, but with signs. At first, it feels like magic, but soon, you realize this magic only appears when you're finally paying attention. The wound has made you raw, porous, open. You're no longer rushing past your life. You're living inside each moment with a kind of reverence you never knew before. And in that slowness, you begin to see what was invisible before. You realize how long you've been trying to make things happen, forcing doors open, shaping yourself to be acceptable, performing love instead of being love. Rejection ended that illusion, and in the wreckage, you've become still enough to notice that life has always been trying to reach you. A certain calm settles in your bones. You begin to trust something again, not a person, but a rhythm, a pulse that's always been there beneath the chaos. You look back at the moment they walked away and wonder, what if they were never meant to stay? What if their leaving aligned you with your next becoming? You notice how often we beg for the thing that was never ours, while life gently redirects us again and again toward what truly is, and you begin to stop resisting. You start to soften into trust. Synchronicity doesn't erase the pain, it reframes it. That friend who calls just when you're breaking. That line you highlight, unaware it will carry you through the next 3 days. That dream that feels like a conversation with your higher self. These are not accidents. These are soul threads being tugged back toward the center. You realize that the universe doesn't always give you what you want. It gives you what you need to grow, to evolve, to awaken. Rejection was just the beginning, a doorway disguised as an ending, and now you are walking through that door. You begin to see that every closed path has clarified your true path. Every absence has created space for your presence. Every unanswered message, every canceled plan, every slow drift into silence has returned you to yourself. And in that return, you begin to co-create. You're not just watching for signs, you are becoming one. A quiet nudge for someone else, a mirror to another. The moment you choose to speak truthfully, even when your voice shakes, you participate in the great rhythm. You become part of the unfolding. So you ask yourself, now, what is life trying to show me through this pain? Not just what's been lost, but what's been made possible. Not just who's left, but who you've met within yourself. This is not passive. This is deep participation. You are learning to listen with your whole body, to follow the quiet cues, to respond instead of chase, to allow instead of control. You no longer need to force love to stay. You trust that the love meant for you will recognize your truth and stay because of it. The wound, though still tender, now glows with meaning. It doesn't define you, but it has shaped you. It has made you receptive. And in that receptivity, you found something more precious than approval. You found connection to yourself, to life, to the great unfolding that holds you, even here. So breathe, watch, listen. You are not abandoned. You are being guided. There comes a quiet moment after the pain, after the longing, after the questions have circled themselves into silence, when you look around at the wreckage of what once was and whisper the most powerful phrase you've ever spoken: no more. No more shrinking to fit inside someone else's expectations. No more overgiving just to be seen. No more confusing attention with love. No more chasing those who walk away without turning back. This is not rage, it is reclamation. The moment you say no more, you're not just refusing something outside of you, you're returning something to yourself, your dignity, your energy, your life force. You feel the shift like an anchor, loosening from your chest. You exhale. For the first time in too long, you are choosing you. This is where Jung's idea of individuation begins to take root, not in a grand epiphany, but in the quiet, resolute decisions to stop abandoning yourself in the name of connection, to stop compromising your essence for belonging, to stop betraying your truth to avoid being alone. You may still feel the ache. Rejection leaves residue. But now that ache is tempered by a rising strength, a remembering. You are not here to be everything for everyone. You are here to be wholly, unapologetically you. And that means drawing a line in the sand, not against others, but in devotion to yourself. You remember all the times you stayed too long, when you kept smiling while breaking, when you nodded yes while your soul screamed no, when you made yourself smaller to keep the peace, to be chosen, to be loved. But now, you turn inward and ask, what would it feel like to love myself more than I fear rejection? And something inside you answers, not with words, but with a feeling, a rising warmth, a quiet knowing, a soft defiance. You are no longer at the mercy of others' approval. You no longer need to convince anyone of your worth. You don't beg love to stay. You don't plead for understanding. You stop performing. You start being. This is what wholeness begins to feel like, not perfection, not invulnerability, but integration. The pieces of you that were scattered, silenced, hidden, they start to gather. You feel your center. You hear your voice. And most of all, you trust it. Individuation isn't about becoming someone new. It's about unbecoming everything that was never truly you. The masks fall, the roles dissolve, and in their absence, your real self emerges less polished, maybe, but far more alive. You feel the friction as you grow. You sense the relationships that no longer align. You notice the spaces where you used to shrink, and now you expand. And yes, that expansion might make others uncomfortable, but that's not your burden anymore. You are not here to make yourself easier to digest. You are here to become whole. This shift is not just emotional, it's energetic. You feel it in the choices you make, the boundaries you set, the invitations you decline, the way you speak your truth without wrapping it in apology. You begin to ask, what part of me have I been suppressing just to keep others close, and what would happen if I let it lead instead? This is the turning point. When rejection no longer defines you, it refines you. It carves away what isn't aligned. It strips off what's inauthentic. It cuts you free from false belonging so that you can walk your path with clarity. And you begin to see that every no you say to what drains you is a yes to what nourishes you. Every time you honor your needs, you become more you. Every time you stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you, you reclaim your peace. There's a steadiness now. You are no longer swayed by every wave. You are the ocean floor deep, grounded, whole. So the next time you feel the sting of being unchosen, you will remember you already chose yourself, and that choice will anchor you through every storm. There is a particular kind of rejection that doesn't just bruise your ego, it reaches something ancient inside of you. It's not just heartbreak, it's soul ache. It's the feeling of being torn from something sacred, something that touched the most tender, most mysterious part of your being. And that's when you realize this wasn't just about love. This was about your inner love, your inner balance, your anima and animus. Jung spoke of these inner archetypes, the anima, the feminine soul image within the masculine psyche, and the animus, the masculine soul image within the feminine psyche. But these energies exist in all of us, regardless of gender. They shape how we love, how we receive, how we protect, how we express. And when someone rejects you in love, they often wound not just your outer persona, but these deeper, inner forces. You feel it in the aftermath. Maybe your softness feels unsafe now. Maybe your strength feels unwelcome. Maybe you find yourself oscillating between retreating completely and grasping too tightly. That confusion, that push and pull, that is the anima and animus, shaken, trying to find each other again. Because love, when it's deep, awakens something primal. When you love someone, you're not just bonding with their personality, you're recognizing your own soul mirrored in them. You project the ideal of your inner masculine or feminine onto them. You say, there you are, the part of me I've been missing. And when they walk away, it feels like they've taken something from you. But the truth is, they've only taken the projection. The energy still lives in you. And now, you have a chance to turn inward and re-embody it for yourself. You begin to examine the wound, if they made you feel safe. Maybe your inner masculine, your animus, is asking to rise, to become your own protector, your own clarity, your own voice, if they made you feel deeply seen. Maybe your inner feminine, your anima, is inviting you to nurture yourself with softness. Grace, intuition. You no longer wait for another to embody these things. You become them. It's not easy. You feel the imbalance. You notice how long you've leaned on others to play out the parts of you you didn't know how to hold. You've outsourced strength. You've outsourced gentleness. You've looked outside for completion. But now, the task is integration. You ask, where have I abandoned parts of myself in the pursuit of love, and what would it look like to come home to them? The wound becomes a guide. When the masculine inside you is distorted, you feel rigid, defensive, obsessed with control. When the feminine is in shadow, you feel overly passive, emotionally flooded, disconnected from intuition, and in rejection. Both can go into chaos. But slowly, through attention and care, you begin to listen to each. You stop outsourcing your safety. You build it inside. You stop waiting to be understood. You understand yourself. You stop demanding others meet your unmet needs. You begin to meet them first. This is not a closing of the heart. It's an opening in the right direction. You let the animus within you take your hand when you feel lost, reminding you that you can stand tall, speak truth, hold boundaries. You let the anima within you whisper when you are raw, reminding you to soften, to feel, to trust your inner knowing. Rejection, it turns out, was the invitation to a reunion, not with them, but with the forgotten halves of you. You begin to feel balanced, not invulnerable, but whole. You are no longer half a soul seeking its match. You are a full, evolving being, capable of love, with or without another. And the love you offer next time, it won't be need disguised as affection. It won't be emptiness dressed up as devotion. It will be truth, presence, wholeness, meeting wholeness. So ask, now, what inner energy am I being asked to reclaim through this heartbreak? Because when the anima and animus unite, not in projection, but in embodiment, your life begins to change. You don't just attract different people, you become different. And from that place, love becomes something else entirely. Not rescue, not escape, but resonance. There is a point in the journey where the pain becomes too loud to ignore, too fierce to tame, too honest to pretend it isn't there. You've tried to soothe it, explain it, outrun it, but nothing works. Because this pain isn't asking for a remedy. It's asking for your surrender. You stop trying to fix it. You stop trying to justify who left or why. You stop trying to protect your heart with logic or distance or blame, and instead you walk straight into the fire. Not as punishment, but as purification. This is the moment most people avoid, the holy breaking, the place where your identity, once built around being chosen or wanted or needed by another, begins to burn away, and what remains, not ashes, not ruin, but essence. Flame doesn't destroy the soul, it reveals it. You feel everything here, not just the grief of this one rejection, but the grief of every time you've been overlooked, misunderstood, discarded. You weep for the child in you who kept hoping, even when the doors closed. You rage for the teenager who tried so hard to be lovable that they forgot to be real. You ache for the adult who mistook attention for intimacy, validation for love. This is not weakness, this is release. The fire shows you what you've clung to, your roles, your illusions, your need to be seen in a certain way. You watch them curl into smoke. You feel the fear that without those things, you'll vanish too, but you don't. You remain. Raw, stripped, and more alive than ever. Jung spoke of transformation through suffering not to glorify pain, but to remind us that the psyche cannot expand without death and rebirth. You are not who you were before this heartbreak, and that is not a tragedy, that is evolution. You begin to sense a strange peace beneath the agony, a stillness, pulsing like a heartbeat. You have finally stopped fighting yourself. You've dropped the script, and in its absence, you can finally hear your own truth. You whisper to yourself, I am allowed to grieve. I am allowed to feel. I am allowed to be undone. And even as the tears fall, there is a clarity cutting through you like light through fog. This is what it feels like to shed the false self. You stop asking what they think of you. You stop replaying the last conversation. You stop trying to rewrite what has already ended. Instead, you write something new within you. You begin to trust the burn, to let it shape you. You look at the part of you that was shattered, and you do not reach for glue. You reach for gold. You begin to rebuild with reverence, not desperation. This time, you are not assembling yourself to be chosen. You are becoming whole because you were always meant to be. And here's the secret no one tells you when you walk through the fire and survive. You no longer fear the heat. You no longer beg others to keep you safe. You become your own warmth, your own shelter, your own spark. You ask now, what part of me is being reborn through this pain? You may not have all the answers, but you no longer need them. You feel the quiet power of simply being with your experience without judgment, without resistance. And in that being, something sacred emerges. You begin to recognize the divine intelligence in your suffering, not because it's fair, not because it was easy, but because it brought you back to the core of who you are. The fire does not lie, the fire does not flatter, the fire reveals, and in its light, you see yourself more clearly than ever before. Not broken, not unlovable, but real, radiant, becoming. There is a moment quiet, almost imperceptible, when you realize the pain is no longer at the center of your life. It's still there, maybe, like a shadow at the edge of your vision, but it no longer defines your steps. Something else has taken root, something steadier, truer, deeper. It's you. Not the version of you who tried to earn love through perfection. Not the you who hid behind silence or charm or armor. Not the one who danced endlessly to the rhythm of someone else's desires, but the real you, the one who remained after everything else was stripped away. You stand in the aftermath of rejection, and you don't feel empty, you feel open. It's not just that you've healed, it's that you've become, through the fire, the silence, the ache, you've become someone you never would have met had everything gone according to plan. Someone honest, someone sovereign, someone whole. You look back at the version of yourself who begged, who compromised, who clung, and you do not judge them. You thank them, because they were doing what they knew to survive. But now, survival is no longer your only mode. Now, you are ready to live. Jung taught that the path to wholeness is a spiral, not a straight line. You may revisit your wounds. You may still feel echoes of longing, but now you walk with awareness. You walk with choice. You walk with yourself. You notice how little you need to perform, how little you need to explain. You no longer seek validation from those who are unwilling to offer it. You no longer abandon yourself for a seat at someone else's table. You build your own. And in doing so, you become magnetic not to attention, but to resonance. People begin to sense it, the clarity, the calm, the inner rootedness that doesn't sway when someone leaves or misunderstands you. You're no longer asking, "Do you like me?" You're asking, "Does this feel true to who I am?" You move with integrity. You speak with presence. You love with openness, but not with desperation. And when someone can't meet you, you don't collapse. You bow. You release. You continue. Because now you know rejection is not a verdict. It's a mirror, a teacher, a redirection. And it brought you here not just to healing, but to awakening. You ask now, what have I gained through everything I've lost? The answer comes softly. You've gained yourself. Not in fragments, not in borrowed reflections, but in fullness. You have stopped trying to be digestible. You have stopped editing your truth. You have stopped asking for permission. And from this place, love becomes something holy, not because it completes you, but because it meets you, as you are. This is the final gift of rejection. The masks fall, and in their place, the truth rises, not the polished, performative truth you once offered to be accepted, but the raw, living truth that asks nothing except to be honored. You are no longer afraid to be seen, and more importantly, you are no longer afraid to see yourself. Because now, finally, beautifully, you are home. So let yourself rest now. Let the story fall quiet. You've walked through the ache, sat with the mirror, entered the fire, and emerged changed, not hardened, but softened in the most courageous way. You are not what they could not love. You are not what they walked away from. You are the one who stayed, through every silence, through every disappointment, through every lonely night and unraveling day. You stayed, you endured, and now you are free. Let the world move on without answers. Let the past stay in the past. You do not need closure from those who could not meet you. You have chosen a higher closure, returning to yourself. There is no need to rush toward the next beginning. You are already in it. This moment, this breath is your becoming. Feel the weight lift. Feel the stillness settle into your bones. There is no one to impress, nothing left to prove, just you, here, now, whole. So sleep if you need, cry if you must, laugh. Even, this is your sanctuary. The pain will pass, but what you've awakened cannot be undone. This peace, this knowing, it is yours. Because the love you sought is already within you, and when you choose yourself, the world learns to love the real you. Let you